Okay, so KD has received some backlash right now because Mike James, a former teammate and friend of KD, said that KD basically told him the Nets would lose to Boston before the series had begun. For some people, this adds to the notion that KD isn't the ultimate competitor. Joining with the Warriors, teaming up with Kyrie and Harden, admitting you would lose before even playing. These are things people think about and say Jordan would never. And a lot of that is true. Before the series began, I had Boston in 6 over the Nets because they just had way more continuity as a whole. I do believe the game that turned that series into a sweep was Game 1 when Jason Tatum made the layup at the buzzer. That loss was very demoralizing for KD, in a similar fashion to the Game 1 loss that LeBron and the Cavs had in the NBA Finals when JR forgot to score. When your leader slash best player becomes mentally demoralized, it trickles over to the rest of the troops. What people don't understand about sports, particularly basketball, is that it's a game of energy. The ball has energy. It's a game of runs, a game of feel. And when it's not right, boy, is it wrong. I do believe that KD accepting defeat before the series began was detrimental to himself and the team, but I will give him credit for keeping it away from the media. We heard from Brady last year say that the Bucks just aren't focused enough during the season. Shit, last year we heard Big Ben say the Steelers had no shot before the playoff game against Kansas City, and sure enough, the Steelers got smacked, and the Bucks didn't play with enough urgency in the first half versus the Rams, and it ended up costing them. So overall, I do think a lot of this KD Mike James drama is a whole lot of nothing. But because it's coming from KD, it is viewed differently. I would say on a serious scale, it's like a maybe like a 3 out of 10. And if anything, it's just KD being a high IQ player who is brutally honest with himself. The only thing I would change about what KD did is telling it to Mike James because as a so-called friend, he clearly didn't keep what was said between them, and we are now talking about Mike James more than we ever have before, and that's some weak shit. And I'm not saying that he's not a real friend, but we all have certain people we can't tell things to. In defense of Mike James, I feel like he was saying it to point out how much trouble was going on with the Nets, how much turmoil they were having amongst each other before the series began. I think he was trying to, in a way, he was trying to protect KD by saying, "Hey, KD knew what type of mess the Nets were, and that the Nets were going to be struggling heading into the playoffs because KD's been around championship franchises and he knows, hey, this team doesn't stack up just mentally, not even on skill level, just mentally and the focus level in the organization. They just don't stack up to where Golden State was. Hell, he's probably thinking they don't even stack up to those OKC teams that were getting to the Western Conference Finals, the semifinals, and so on. So, as a guy who's been there and done that before, KD is going to have that perspective. And I'm not getting on here to shit on Mike James either. I'm just talking about the comments and this situation in particular. Mike James is a really, really good basketball player. He's in his 30s. He's an older player. He's small. He's not a big guy. He's not super athletic. So he doesn't really fit into the timeline of the NBA. The NBA wants guys who are big, young, big, athletic guys who can guard multiple positions, can score off the ball, guys who, are young and, have upside to them. So Mike James doesn't really fit the NBA timeline. He did play with KD in the Nets at one point, and he's been in the NBA before that, I believe, but he doesn't really fit the NBA timeline or the NBA mold. But just from a skills perspective, Mike James can ball. Mike James got a nice sky hook. He finishes well inside. He can shoot it. Like Mike James is a bucket getter. He's like in no, and I'm not saying this in a disrespectful way, but he's like a street hooper he's like a street ball artist the way that he plays basketball. Like I'm sure him and Kyrie had some nice one-on-ones in practice when Mike James was a part of the Nets. But anyways, getting back to the point, I think all real basketball heads knew the Nets weren't coming out the East last year because they were a team that was still trying to figure themselves out heading into the postseason. And like I said, KD is a high IQ player, and he really studies the game of basketball. So KD knew that team and the situation they were in, it wasn't going to bode well. I just wish that he didn't say it out loud, but hey, that's KD, and he was only saying it to a friend, so I can't penalize him too much when he was just saying it to a friend. Michael Jordan's probably not saying that even to a friend, even, in private with his parents. But who knows? Who knows? But what I do know is KD didn't run and tell the media that. He didn't do anything that LeBron does or these other guys do where they throw shade at their teammates or say that they're top heavy or, point any critiques at the coaching staff or anything like that. KD he went out there and he played, and the Celtics, made a crazy play at the end of game one, and I felt like that just kind of crushed their spirits a little bit. So, he should have been mentally tougher. You would have hoped that he would have been mentally tougher and could have rallied the guys together to at least get one win. But once they went down 2-0, it was looking pretty ugly. I still had them winning game 3. But, man, when game 3, when Jason Tatum came out in the first quarter of game 3, and I believe he had 12 points in that first quarter, and he finished the game with, close to 40, I believe. Once he did that, you saw that the Celtics were, they brought their game. They brought their game to Brooklyn that day. So the Nets ended up getting swept, and we'll see how this whole KD saga plays out. There's so many different reports and so many different things going on, and a lot of it is just speculation. So I haven't got to making a video about it yet, but the KD videos will come soon enough. But anyways, that's it on that. Thanks for watching. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Share the videos. I appreciate you guys. Till next time, peace.